Fantasy Focus Football is presented by Geico. Switch to Geico and see all the ways that you could save. It's Friday, November 18th. Fields, Stephania, and Mike here to not just recap last night's Titans-Packers game. Titans score a very convincing, awesome, typical Titans win over the Packers, 27-17. But also we're going to preview all the games ahead for this weekend. How would you describe like the stage of where we're at in the NFL season? Are we in the dog days right now, Stephania?
Dog days makes me think of summer.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah, it does not feel like summer at all right now.
It's not summer at all,
Sorry,
especially with a big snow event kind of driving what's happening
how about
this
that?
weekend.
Yeah.
I know. But I guess we should mention it since like that's the thing is that game for Buffalo is now moved to Detroit.
That's right. And we'll dive in. We previewed it yesterday. And so we said, when we were previewing it, we said, hey, we're going to assume the game is being played in normal conditions, not realizing that would necessarily mean Detroit, but it is officially being played in Detroit. Daniel Dopp Bowl taking place between the Bills and the Browns. The Bills couldn't even practice today. They've already canceled that, Mike. So, but I would just say, assuming the game goes on as scheduled and the Bills can get there because the snow has started falling in Buffalo and it is ridiculous, probably a net benefit for fantasy, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. We would have been worried coming right down to the wire how much snow will be on the ground, how windy will it be, all those things. Now it's in a dome. It's all systems go. And honestly, being indoors.
They're going to be there for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right, because they got another game there on Thursday. So,
yeah. If anything, it just will help that passing game flourish. So we feel great about guys like we said were borderline yesterday. The guys you have to keep an eye on if it is in poor conditions, like a Gabe Davis, for example, feel a lot stronger playing indoors in this game.
So all you that live out there in Detroit, do us a favor, like tweet at us and give us some suggestions that we can pass along to Bills players, coaches, and staffers because they are going to be there for 4 days, I think. I can't imagine they'd go back to Buffalo given the snow.
The
snow,
right?
I think it's the plan, though, is to stay there.
Stay right there. So if you have any ideas of ways to spend 4 days in Detroit, if you're a high school or college friend or elementary school friend of Daniel Dopp and you're willing to host a Bills player this week, you could be like an Airbnb for the Buffalo Bills this upcoming week.
We heard Mama Dopp's hotel is open, right?
Yes, it is open, and she can cook.
She's going to love you for that.
Yeah. I mean, Daniel said it, so I'm just saying.
Lots of pies.
Who would stay there? Who do you think they would get along with her the best?
Okay, so I'm trying to think. For the Buffalo Bills, they got a lot of great personalities.
Probably Josh Allen.
Josh Allen would be good, yeah. Von Miller, great personality. A lot of, he's just an ageless wonder. He'd fit in well. They could talk about all kinds of things. They could reminisce about the Broncos days. They could reminisce about all kinds of. There'd be so much fun to be had with Von Miller.
Are there any former Lions on the Bills?
There's got to be at least one.
That would be who should.
We'd have to think about it.
Yeah, we'll find one by the end of the show. I am sure. A former
DeMarlo. Did he have a cup of tea with the Lions? Maybe?
I think he may have gone Buffalo, but I could be wrong there. Anyways,
I'm grasping for straws.
Kyle will get.
Kyle will have
no breaking tables.
Yeah.
Okay, Bills players, don't break Mama Dopp's tables.
Yeah, that's right. It's a very, very valuable table and that. Let's quickly recap Thursday Night Football game. Again, I mentioned Titans win 27-17. For the Packers, Aaron Rodgers, better at least, 19.1 fantasy points as he had 227 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. So the good news of Rodgers is, if you're looking for good news, like you keep getting the consistency of multiple passing touchdowns. He's done 8 and 11 games. The problem is, once again, Mike, no ceiling here for Aaron Rodgers, 19.1 fantasy points. He has under 230 passing yards in 4 of his past 5 games. He hasn't thrown for 300 yards in 16 straight games. That's ridiculous.
I know. It is, but progress, right?
Yeah.
Like kind of we're making that leap. He has 19-plus points in consecutive games. And, in the offseason, a lot of what I said was essentially maybe if Watson's decent and he has Lazard and little Tunyon mixed in and Randall, like maybe he's fine, right? Like that's part of what the optimism was. Maybe Watson will work out for them. He hasn't been here all season. He's been injured, right? And now he's here, and suddenly Rodgers is starting to produce in fantasy. So maybe there's something there for a stretch run here. Maybe he can be a streamer or a back-end QB1. So I'm not getting too excited. We have a long sample of him struggling this year, but we'll see.
Yeah, still very touchdown dependent too. I mean, 227 passing yards and 19 fantasy
in a couple
points.
days.
Sure has, yeah.
But I don't think Aaron Rodgers looked great. Like just talking about the way
yeah,
he was throwing the ball, and they did a little close up on his thumb. He's on the injury report every week because of his thumb. They showed he's wearing a little tape wrap, like a little thumb spica. It's just to support. But he's talking about it now. He's talking about his thumb is not
Wobbly
great,
throws after
and
the
it's
game,
cold,
yeah.
and you can see it. And he could have had more fantasy points in last night's game if he was throwing better. So I do think that's a factor.
I'm glad you said that because there were some throws just wide open. He completely missed. Like that one to Sammy Watkins. I think it was in the fourth quarter.
That was one of
I
them.
mean, he doesn't miss those. Like
Right.
I couldn't believe it. He did that a lot.
It is part of the. Obviously, I think the problem early was who's he going to throw it to. Now he's got a guy who's pretty consistent, and he's struggling to get the ball where he needs to.
So Aaron Jones, the other Aaron on this offense, has 14 fantasy points. Nothing out of the ordinary for him. 40 rushing yards, 6 catches, no touchdowns, but still a useful night at 14 fantasy points. Alan Lazard had 10.7 fantasy points, 5 catches, 57 yards. All season, it's been the touchdowns that have carried Alan Lazard. He had a season-high 11 targets. Seems like the Packers are starting to find a little bit of a rhythm with their passing game, as Mike just alluded to. But the most important part of that is Christian Watson, their second-round pick out of North Dakota State, who followed up 3 receiving touchdowns with 2. So he kind of slacked on Thursday night with only 2 touchdown catches, but 4 catches, 48 yards, 2 scores. He had 6 targets, 21.1 fantasy points. We discussed him at great length yesterday, just talking about how, as far as like late season lottery tickets go, we kind of classified him and Kadarius Toney is in this interesting tier of like play with very good quarterbacks, super talented guys. It just hadn't clicked for a variety of different circumstances up to that point. There could be something here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we said yesterday, right? Like this could be the real deal. This isn't a Nick Westbrook situation, right? He actually could be real because he has the talent, he has the pedigree, and he's in a situation where he can play every down. And that's what we've seen. He's played over 80% of the snaps in each of the last 2 games for the Packers, 20-plus fantasy points in both. And moving forward, the Packers have arguably the easiest schedule for wide receivers, which is interesting. A lot of good matchups coming up for him. So can Lazard and Watson be fantasy starters going forward? Yes, absolutely. I think we'll be ranking Lazard as a borderline wide receiver 2 and probably Watson as a 3 or at worst a good flex.
As far as the Titans go, Ryan Tannehill did have a nice day. He had a really nice day, as a matter of fact.
He actually threw the ball
Yeah.
really well.
Great.
I thought he looked as good as I've seen him as a passer in this game.
My suspicion is that not a ton of people in single quarterback leagues were starting Ryan Tannehill. 333 passing yards, 19 fantasy points last night. As far as like a career evolution goes, like Tannehill used to be one of the best athletes amongst all quarterbacks. He doesn't run anymore.
No.
He doesn't have a game with more than 12 rushing yards this season. Now,
He
of
also
course,
had the ankle injury too.
yeah, but even prior to that, right? He hasn't been running. He just hasn't.
If he wasn't running before that, he's not running now.
He is not running. He had -3 rushing yards last night, and then Derrick Henry did Derrick Henry things plus more. Plus more. Yeah. Yeah. Throw a touchdown pass because Derrick Henry is the man. His longevity is simply remarkable, and he did have 2 catches for 45 yards. That was good. He's now just 7 yards shy of tying his career high for receiving yards in a season. As if the rushing wasn't great enough for Derrick Henry, you get that added boost with a little bit of receiving. We don't need a ton from Derrick Henry for him to be a top 5 running back. He has reasserted himself as one of the very best players in all of fantasy. Austin Hooper finds the end zone twice last night. He had not yet scored prior to this season. He's been a little bit more targeted of late, but still, as far as tight ends go, not quite in that lock-it-in tier.
Yeah, one guy not on here we should mention.
Traylon
Burks.
Right?
We
I
absolutely.
was like, didn't he have that 50-yard catch? I was like, hey, look at him coming
7
off
for
IR.
111 last
7
night.
for 111 with that long catch. And if that was 5 yards further down the field, he might have scored a touchdown as well. 8 targets in that game. He has 14 now in 2 games since he's back from injury. He's third in line at receiver right now, but that will continue to evolve into a larger role. We definitely worry about volume and ceiling in this Titans offense, but there's a reason they traded Brown and used that pick on Traylon Burks, right? He's supposed to be their number 1 receiver, and he's coming around. He's available in 73% of ESPN leagues. Not a bad guy to scoop up and consider for your flex.
Yeah, and maybe not quite on the level of Christian Watson because Ryan Tannehill is not on the same level as Aaron Rodgers, and the Titans really can win a game where they throw it like, what was it, 5 times with Malik Willis? Like, not that they'll do that with Ryan Tannehill, but the volume in terms of overall passing attempts might be lower in Tennessee, but kind of in that same bucket as the two players we discussed earlier. At this point of the season, what you're looking for is some guys that might be able to swing a matchup, and Treylon Burks fits that bill.
Yep.
Game preview time? Let's preview some games. Let's do it. We begin with Chicago traveling down to Atlanta. As far as lineup blocks go, Justin Fields, who has been on fire. We have him as quarterback 3 this week, and we might be too low, literally, because he has been quarterback 1 in, 2 straight weeks for Justin Fields. He's been awesome. No major injuries here, Stephania, I don't think.
Notice Khalil Herbert gone, so he's away. No,
Yep.
I think that's it. Cole Kmet had been on the injury report because of a thigh issue, but upgraded on Thursday to limited practice.
Okay, and as far as question marks in this game go, Mike, I think people like David Montgomery, I think we're sort of pretty steady here, right?
I bumped him up to lineup block status with no Herbert.
Yeah,
right?
I feel the same way.
He's 15-plus touches in 7 of 8 games, and now Herbert's gone. He could be a 20-touch guy.
We'll see some trust in Emner, but as far as Bears pass catchers go, despite the fact that Justin Fields has risen so far up the quarterback ranks, it's not like we're quite at the spot where you absolutely have to start a Bears receiver. But if there was ever a week, it's a really good one.
Yeah, definitely. Falcons most fantasy points allowed to receivers this season. 5th most of the perimeter, 7th most of the slot. Doesn't matter where these guys line up. They're going to be in a good spot against a team that has just struggled with personnel, whether it's injury or ineffectiveness in the secondary. So Darnell Mooney, he's been top 35 for his last 7 games. He remains on the flex radar. Chase Claypool, can't trust him yet. We want to, and at some point the playing time is going to go up, but he ran 5 pass routes last week. 5 pass routes. You can't start him.
Did you hear what he said about the route tree being more complex and what he ran in Pittsburgh? And Luke Getsy came back and said, yeah, we only wanted to give him a little bit at a time, but that he was getting closer to diving in. So if that's to be believed, then I think his role will increase. But
Well, another example, though, like Christian Watson, even Kadarius Toney and Treylon Burks, guys who go from limited roles to all of a sudden a much more significant role. The hard part is forecasting when that shift will take place.
Right.
And hopefully it happens this week and we can feel much better about Chase Claypool for the rest of the season. We mentioned Cole Kmet, who actually leads the Bears in targets over the past 2 weeks with 13. Pretty good option there amongst tight ends. Then on the Atlanta side, I kind of feel like the conundrum for Marcus Mariota is the same every single week. I don't know that you can really assess when a good matchup versus a bad matchup takes place, Mike, because for Mariota, if he exceeds in fantasy, it's often because he's a runner. And how many defenses do we know that are awesome at slowing down really good runners or struggle slowing down really good running quarterbacks?
Yeah, when it's quarterbacks, you just don't know.
You don't know.
There's a lot of randomness with that for sure. So, look, he doesn't have a huge ceiling. He's gotten to 20 points only twice, but he has 4 top 10. So he is your prototypical streamer. Maybe your quarterback's on a bye. He's going to be out there in waivers in a lot of leagues. You could scoop him up and file him in for a week. You don't feel great about it, but he can hold down the fort and get you 13 to 15 points. The streak is still alive. The Falcons remain one of 4 teams that have at least 2 touchdowns offensively in every game this season.
I want them to be the last man standing.
I hope so.
in that
I hope
streak.
so. Well, the Bills, maybe if they had the weather game, would fall off that list. They're still alive. That's
the Browns
Chiefs and
defense
the
probably
Eagles.
won't be the answer to that, right?
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
Let's start to the Falcons backfield. Is there anybody that you can start now? Because they now have 4 guys playing, all healthy, all active. Does that mean Cordell Patterson goes from a player that we thought had real value at the beginning of the season to no value?
Yeah, right now he's tough. I mean, you're a little higher than I am. I view him as maybe a flex option, but the big problem is a lack of receiving. He has 39 receiving yards on 9 targets this season.
That's
it's
crazy.
way below what we could have possibly expected. And again, to your point with the 4 running backs, it's not like they're mixing in. I mean, Patterson played 22 snaps last week. Algier 30, Avery Williams 9, Caleb Huntley 9. I mean, that's a pretty significant amount of usage for 4 different guys. So he's tough to trust right now. If you use him, you're really hoping that he finds the end zone.
This could be recency bias, but I'll be hard-pressed to think of an offense that has been less fantasy-friendly than the Falcons are this year. Between not utilizing top-tier talents and obviously Drake London and also Kyle Pitts, plus this running back by committee between these 4 backs right now, it is really tough to find someone to start. And you may have noticed that we did not have Kyle Pitts in the lineup blocks. I think that's the first time all season. You can't do it, guys. Is it possible that Kyle Pitts finishes as a top 5 fantasy this weekend? Of course it is. But I understand, there's venom that is spewing from people who used a premium pick on Kyle Pitts because while he may still end up finishing the season as tight end 8, it won't feel like that at all. And you do not draft him to be tight end 8, averaging 8 fantasy points per game. You drafted him to be the next Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews.
Yeah, no doubt about it. He does have 7 or more targets in 3 straight, which is a point in the right direction. And we joked about this on the CSS DFS podcast yesterday. we did our like other values at tight end, and he's on the list because tight end is a disaster area. I mean, you add in the bye weeks, you add in the fact, well, some teams aren't on that slate, of course, but also no Zach Ertz, no Dallas Goedert. I mean, suddenly you're like, all right, Kyle Pitts has had some good games, and he's seeing 7 targets a game. He's a mid-range tight end 1 suddenly. He's just back in that conversation because the other options are so poor. So I have him 6th. I mean, there's just not a lot of good options at tight end right now.
His catch percentage this year, if you had to guess what it was?
56.
41.
Oh, my God.
You know that ranks amongst qualified players? 129 of them?
127th.
129. Dead last.
Oh,
Dead last. Wow. That's really
last. I mean, and by the way, that's a quarterback stat much more than it's a tight end stat, right?
Well, it's also a usage stat. He runs a lot of
Where
vertical
are the
routes.
targets?
Exactly. A lot of guys are short range, which is partially excuses that, but not fully excuses that.
It's
hard to blame
tough.
him.
And by the way, like, I don't want to crush the offensive coaching staff because this team is still in the mix for its division.
Yeah,
they are playing the hand they have been dealt. I remain optimistic that a year from now, if there's a much sturdier, better pocket passer, that things will look a lot different. Just a maddening 2022 season.
Oh, yeah.
Let's go to the Jets and the Patriots. These two teams played recently. They play again this time up here in New England. Lineup blocks, we got 2 of them, both on the Patriots side. Ramondre Stevenson obviously has been awesome. And then Jacoby Myers. Let me just remind you that we have at minimum 8 receivers that are awesome that are out this week because of bye or injury, and potentially even more with guys like Hollywood Brown and Jamar Chase very iffy, if not unlikely to play in their games. As far as the injuries go in this game, though, Stephania, Damian Harris, who hard to tell whether his recent usage is more about the play of Ramondre Stevenson or just the hamstring plus the sickness and all that.
Yeah, I mean, he's off the injury report now. So whatever there's not any excuses as far as injury situation for him this week. It's really a question of, but I just don't see Ramondre Stevenson's been playing so well. I don't really see it fluctuating.
He's the best offensive player.
Why would it change?
I was going to say, he's their best offensive player. Hard to not have Ramondre Stevenson stay in that role. Let's get to the Jets, though, Mike. Let's talk about this backfield because it's been a couple of games now with James Robinson now in the fold. How would you size up how that backfield is divvied up?
Yeah, so I'm giving an edge to Michael Carter for now. The last time we saw the Jets, it was 24 snaps for Robinson, 31 snaps for Michael Carter. Carter ran a few more pass routes. Robinson had an edge of 1 in the carry department, actually had 1 more target as well. I think that's what you're going to see, right? Kind of a little edge to Robinson in the carry department, and Carter should kind of take the lead in passing situations. It's going to be an even split. They're going to use both of these guys for the most part, but the passing down work gives Carter the edge in fantasy. Really tough matchup, though. Patriots' second fewest fantasy points to running backs this season, only 2 touchdowns allowed to that position. So I don't feel great about either, but Carter I have as the better flex option.
Tricky one here, Garrett Wilson, because Wilson was so good at the beginning of the season with Joe Flacco, and then things really halted when Zach Wilson took over, in part because they were playing awesome defense and running the football really well with Breece Hall. They didn't have to throw the ball as much. He's been better of late. He's got back-to-back top 15 finishes. Does that mean he should be close to a lineup lock?
I wouldn't say lineup lock just because of the nature of this offense and how Zach Wilson's been so up and down, but I have him 25th, and the last time he played New England a couple weeks ago, he had 115 yards. He also had 92 yards against the Bills on 8 catches recently. So he's trending up, and a big reason for that is that Corey Davis has been out injured, and he's still not practicing, so he's probably not going to play. And Elijah Moore is just in the doghouse, right? He's not really playing. He's basically fourth. Denzel Mims is playing over
receiver,
him. Yeah, right.
Elijah Moore. Which, by the way, that's where he should be.
And that's where Braxton Berrios plays too. So he's kind of behind him now. And maybe that'll change, fine. But it's not like Moore was demanding a lot of targets anyway, right? Garrett Wilson has emerged as their number 1 as long as Davis is out anyway. And for now, he's borderline. He's a borderline lock. It's just tough to trust this offense.
Let's get to the Rams and the Saints. As far as the lineup blocks go, how about this? Would you have thought that there would be just 2 in a matchup between the Rams and the Saints prior to this season? None from the Rams.
Cooper, we miss you.
Yeah, Alvin Kamara and also Chris Olave. Olave continues to be one of the brightest lights amongst all rookie players this year. Injuries, Stephania. Cooper Kupp, just a reminder where we're at and what the timeline is and what the likelihood is that we'll see him at the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really know the timeline. We haven't heard much about it since he had surgery this week to repair his high ankle sprain that he suffered in last week's game. And we know that it's typically a 4 to 6 week injury. It can be longer depending on the player. But at what point does it become relevant to bring him back if the Rams are really completely out of contention? There's not necessarily any urgency to it.
Will Matthew Stafford even be on the field to throw it to somebody?
I think so, because he's back practicing in full. Remember last week, they thought he might clear before the game. He did not. Clear the concussion protocol, that is. He did not. And then early in the week, he was still not around. But now he's back practicing in full. So I think that's a good omen.
Did you see the quote, and not to get off the rails here, from Sean McVay, that like someone asked him point blank, like, when was Matthew just diagnosed with the concussion, or was he diagnosed with the concussion? He was like inconclusive in his answer.
Yeah, I think that's some of where we are right now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Gotcha.
not definitive. He had some symptoms that you might approach as if a player had a concussion. Once that happens, you have to go through all the phases before you can return.
All righty. Yeah, that one, I mean, not that I'm a medical expert, but that one I was like, I don't understand at all.
I think everybody's getting a little more vague, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I just think it's if there's any symptom that remotely resembles what could be consistent with a concussion, they're going to treat it as such.
Mike, if you want to play a Rams running back.
No, I don't want to.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was going to get at, is that the problem is you had 3 guys play at least 10 snaps the last time that they took the field. 34 snaps for Darrell Henderson, 21 for Kyron Williams. Maybe Kyron Williams' role grows by the week, but as we were talking about with Chase Claypool, like, maybe it does, but until we see it, how can you really put value behind a player who has one actual game under his belt and an offensive line that has been dealing with injuries to 7 of its top 8 players this season? I would prefer not to play any Rams receiver, Rams running back. Would you play any Rams pass catcher, though? Like, lump the tight ends and the wide receivers into this conversation.
Look, I hate to say this, but
you're in on Allen Robinson.
It could be. It could happen now. It could happen for Allen Robinson because he might get 6, 7, 8 targets a game just because he has to, right? So what I looked at, and I think you and I were texting about this maybe, about the routes run after Cooper Kupp left the game, or was that a different one? I don't remember.
We're talking about the Chiefs.
Oh, there was the Chiefs. It was the Chiefs.
You were texting about
idea.
probably
After
your
Juju went
other,
out.
probably the actual fantasy expert that you trust is who you're texting about.
That's what it
Rams.
was. Yeah. I was like amateur stuff with Field, and then I talked to other people about serious stuff. But same idea though, right? We were talking about when Juju went out, what it looked like. Well, when Cooper Kupp went out, it was Ben Skoranek ran 16 routes, Robinson was 15, Van Jefferson was 14, and then Brandon Powell was 2, right? So there's a clear big 3 there that they utilized, which they like to do. They love 11 personnel with 3 guys on the field. So those were the clear 3. I was also looking at who was in the slot, right? Who was taking those Cooper Kupp routes and snaps, and it was pretty much split 8 each between Skoranek and Robinson. So
it's interesting.
I'm thinking receiver by committee, and I'm thinking that Robinson will probably see enough volume as their de facto number 1 to be fantasy relevant and hang in that wide receiver 3 conversation. But Skoranek has some sleeper appeal because he's just kind of, you can make the case he's been ahead of Robinson this season, right? So, and the better player, frankly. So I think he's not the worst bench ad. I don't feel super comfortable starting him yet, but Robinson, this is a shot. If he doesn't deliver now, I mean, it's just a wasted contract, basically.
I just can't wait till Sunday when Mike Clay and Tyler get to talk about this.
Oh my God, the 2 you're going to be.
I have my asterisk ready.
Hot air.
Yeah.
So I think one of the interesting, here's like the dynamic that I will be watching on Sunday for the Rams, is that so much of Cooper Kupp's production is because Cooper Kupp is the man. He's incredible.
Yeah.
Part of it is because I think it's just sort of muscle memory for Matthew Stafford that when the play begins,
right away.
I'm going to look for number 10 because, as we've talked about many times, no one can cover this guy, despite the fact that he's been the most prolific receiver for the past year and a half. What happens now? Is it that whoever is running the Cooper Kupp routes takes on that lead role? Because it seems like maybe Ben Skoranek could have a shot at that Cooper Kupp role, who's not the talent of Cooper Kupp, but a useful and sort of nifty player who's done some good things in terms of versatility for the Rams. Maybe Matthew's mindset goes to, Ben's a good, solid player, but Allen's been around for a long time. Like, does his trust just grow almost subconsciously in Allen Robinson this week? Because he has to. And I'll be watching that one closely this week. I think it's a really interesting situation to follow up on. I do think Tyler Higbee has a better game as well for the Rams, just because, again, they need him to, and he did have 8 targets and 8 catches this past week. We're going to come back and talk about the Panthers and the Ravens, couple of major injuries for Baltimore. But first, I'm going to tell you about Geico. Geico asks, how would you love a chance to save some money on insurance?
Yep.
Well, of course you would, Mike. And when it comes to great rates on insurance, Geico can help. Like with insurance for your car, truck, motorcycle, boat, and RV. Even help with homeowners or renters coverage. Plus, add an easy-to-use mobile app, available 24-hour roadside assistance, and more, and Geico's an easy choice. Switch today and see all the ways you could save. It's easy. Simply go to geico.com or contact your local agent today.
Make Little Caesars the official pizza sponsor of the NFL part of your game day. Order online during their Pizza pregame 1 hour before NFL games and get ready for some football and fun. Choose your favorite Little Caesars pizza or pick the toppings you crave. Either way, you win. And speaking of winning, everyone scores with convenient delivery or their in-store pizza portal pickup. So grab some friends and enjoy a few slices during the tastiest hour before kickoff. Pizza.
Can you tell the story real quick, Stephania, about the actress in the Matthew Stafford commercial?
Yeah.
It's actually funny.
It is funny. It's about the power of the pod, and credit to everybody out there who, listens to the pod. We never know. We're so appreciative of our fans, but we were talking about that
Mostly
ad.
they're mostly for you.
No. We were talking about the Little Caesars pizza ad, and of course Matthew Stafford's in it, and then you see them coaching him on
and
how to
hilarious.
say. And yes, and so you see a woman with the headset on, and it's
pizza.
Better. She makes him do it over and over again until he gets it right. Well, her name's Gwendolyn, and she's on Instagram. And I mentioned when you guys were talking about her in the commercial, I follow her. She's hilarious on Instagram. She does all these bits where she does like 80s movies, and she's like duetted next to it, and she's interpreting it with like the outfits and the hair and the dancing. Hilarious. I love her. And so after we talked about the ad and how great it was, she reached out to me on Instagram and said that she heard from her husband that she was mentioned on the pod.
About that?
And so her
Wait,
husband,
she slid into your DMs?
I
That's how
followed
we
her.
roll. Yeah,
That's how
yeah.
we roll.
No,
So now we're best friends.
Wow.
No, but anyway, she was super appreciative, and she said it made her day that we talked about it on the podcast.
Wow, that is awesome.
Yeah.
Well, shout out to Gwendolyn. Shout out to her husband for being a loyal listener.
And you guys should go follow if you want entertainment.
She's
She's
hilarious
awesome.
as well.
Yeah, and so there's another commercial she has out now. So this is her thing.
Do you ever comb through your DMs on Instagram, Mike?
Not really.
Oh,
mine are all.
Mine
are like, dude, you told me to start Aaron Rodgers with an emoji. It's not the ring finger. It's not the index finger. It's the finger in between there. Meanwhile, Stephania has celebs dropping into her DMs.
yeah.
I get
Mine are
all
a little
kinds.
different.
Okay.
Yeah, I get all kinds. Don't worry. I get those too.
Hers are all verified people.
Yeah, no.
We're just random
If
people
only-
trashing our
if
calls.
People
only-
subscribe to
if only you
Instagram
knew.
Blue
We
and
can have a
DM you.
conversation offline.
What's it cost?
about
What's
what it looks
Instagram
like.
Blue cost? I don't even know
We're all going to
anymore.
find out soon.
All right. Yeah, go follow us all on Instagram, by the way. Mike Clay NFL, Stephania B87, is there underscore? And
No,
I'm
on
Matfield Yates.
Instagram, I'm Stephania Bell.
Just in case. You guys
Just
may
in
have
case
heard.
is right.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
Field
Stephania
Yates.
Bell.
Yeah.
Not Stephania B87.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. You're Stephania Bell now.
Yeah.
You updated that. It used to be Stephania B87.
That is correct.
All right. You can find us. Just search our names. You'll find us there in case that is the platform we have to use for information going forward. Panthers and Ravens. You may have heard they're playing a game this Sunday. As far as lineup blocks go, there are 3, one with an asterisk next to it. Dante Foreman for the Panthers, Lamar Jackson for the Ravens. He hasn't been a top 10 quarterback since week 3.
Wow.
Ridiculous. He's been obviously good, but not great. And then Mark Andrews, who has been great because he is Mark Andrews. But Stephania, is he going to play on Sunday?
This is what he said.
Okay.
You never know. I've been dying to get out there. Now, it is good that he's been back in practice. It's still
going off a
limited,
bye,
but he's not ready to commit, or he hadn't been as of Thursday, to whether he'd be able to play. Do you know he leads the Ravens with 42 catches, 488 yards, and 5 touchdowns?
He's very good.
Yeah.
He's
good.
unbelievable.
We would like to see him back out there. He also talked about how dangerous it would be when he and Isaiah Likely were on the field together. So I think we may see some of that even when he comes back.
Honestly, it'd be dangerous if just Mark Andrews was out there.
Yes, well, yeah, we don't want anything to cut into his fantasy production, but I'm just saying, I think he's excited about what Likely has done in his absence. I do think he's still got the 2 injuries, knee and shoulder, but I think we could see him back this week.
And John Harbaugh did express some optimism on that one early in the week. How about the Gus Bus? Is the Gus Bus
the Gus
road
Bus,
this weekend?
similar thing, limited practice, are hoping to get him going, and we'll see.
Mike,
Hamstring injuries are a lot more uncertainty heading into the
If
final.
Gus is out, Mike, Kenyon Drake has value. If he's not, I don't think either one of them are anything close to lineup blocks.
That's exactly right. They're going to use multiple backs. If Edwards plays, you'll see some Justice Hill mixed in as well, right? They'll play 10, 12 snaps. So in that scenario, I'd like to avoid. If Edwards is out, though, look, back in week 9 when we last saw Drake as the lead back here, he had 27 6 touches. You don't see that often from Ravens running backs, but they clearly trust him. 109 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. He'll at least be an RB2. So not a bad guy to have on your bench. He's still out there in some leagues too, and you might have an RB2 on your hands if you're in a tough spot. A guy to grab. Keep an eye on Edwards' status.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Kenyon Drake, he's like, I mean, what is it about the Ravens? Like, what's in the water in Baltimore? Where like last year it was like, all right, so week 9 lineup block, Devontae Freeman hasn't played in 9 years. Hey, by the way, Le'Veon Bell might have 8 catches this weekend. Meanwhile,
Latavius Murray play it?
Latavius Murray played well for them last year. Yeah, but although Latavius is kind of playing all right for the Broncos too, out of nowhere. Baltimore.
It's
Good
just
stuff,
that was
man.
part of the
Just
optimism
good.
with J.K. Dobbins. If he could have just got healthy and stayed healthy, but
Sounds like we're still a few weeks away at minimum there.
Stefania's glaring at me when I say that.
No, I'm
I told
not.
you.
Just-
No, Stephania was
I'm
on
not.
it.
I
Listen,
didn't-
next
I
year.
didn't- I didn't
You people,
speak
you
anything
people
about it.
pay
You did.
attention.
You
not
spoke
say
with
it.
your
Pay
the
attention.
way you looked at me. That's how you spoke.
Mike,
attention.
that's you're projecting.
Pay attention, people. Listen, when Mike and I talk, you can listen to as much or as little as you want. When Stephania talks, you listen. Them's the rules. Okay?
Yeah, I've already met with Stephania to talk about how next year I could be better at my job by just listening to everything she says. We're working on that, okay? We're going to have some off-season meetings. We're going to make sure we get this injury stuff right in the projections next year.
Is this the is Devontae Smith DJ Moore, or is DJ Moore Devontae Smith?
I don't know if I like that comp.
Okay, because you think Devontae Smith has more upside weekly.
Yeah, he definitely does. Moore had 2 good games, right? And they were both with PJ Walker. And guess what? There's no PJ Walker this week, so I am very nervous about DJ Moore. And you might think, well, then why is he 23rd or you have him 15th?
Yeah, 9 receivers in the ball. Yeah.
It's just sometimes you have to follow the volume to an extent, right? And he has a 28% target share and a 44% air yard share. I mean, 44, that's a huge number. And sometimes you just have to chase that enough to consider a guy a wide receiver 3. So he's a tough one. He's one of the hardest guys to rank for sure. But he really hasn't even been boom bust. He's just been bust, except for when PJ Walker's been out there for those 2 games. And one of them was like, that was an overtime game where
Hail
he got
Mary,
that long
63-yard touchdown pass.
So
Yeah.
he's a tough one for sure. And he should have been.
Totally
He's been
is.
such a high floor,
He's a
solid
really good
player for
player.
years, and it's just been ruined this year.
Let's go to the Commanders and the Texans. This game being played down in Houston, and lineup blocks, a couple of players on the rise. Dameon Pierce has been good for a while, but just seemingly keeps getting better. The big thing with Dameon Pierce, hopefully a little bit more passing game volume and hopefully a touchdown this weekend. Then Terry McLaurin right back inside the top 10. Again, 8 or 9 or 10 great wide receivers unavailable, but still, Terry McLaurin has earned that status. Look at his target share over the past 4 games. It's
With
absurd.
Heineke? Oh,
8
Heineke
plus
loves
targets
him.
in every game. Seems like there is a real chemistry between those 2 players. And while Jahan Dotson did return last week, didn't play nearly as much. Like, by the way, it stands to reason. He's the best player on their team by far, Terry McLaurin is.
Oh, yeah.
Like, get the ball to him as much as you possibly
And Taylor
can.
Heineke knows that, and he's taking good care of him.
And as far as the injuries go, Stephania, J.D. McKissick's been out, which is sort of like a sneaky important injury for fantasy.
Yeah, and he's not practicing. So I don't think you're going to see him again this week.
Brandon Cooks has been out and in and out of practice, but like not entirely sure how much of it is injury related.
Well, and that was what we've been saying. We've been talking about this wrist injury since before the trade deadline.
Yeah.
But now he's got a hip
Yeah.
issue listed next to it. So there is probably something else there. But he was back as full participant yesterday. So
I'd say just get used to that, right?
availability wise, yeah, it's hard to tell.
It's yeah, I was going to say a lot of
don't
things. With his status right now, it's just a very unique situation. The player is at odds with the organization, and maybe some of the things that we normally can just assess for what they are, we can't assess for what they are right now with Brandon Cooks. All right, so on the Commander side here, Mike, normally it would be tough to justify playing both backs, but this matchup with the Texans is the gift that keeps on giving. How confident are you in Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson?
Well, I have them both in my top 20.
Okay.
So pretty good. And that, of course, assumes there's no J.D. McKissick here. So against the Eagles, we saw Robinson have 26 carries in that game. No targets. That's going to continue to limit his ceiling. But if he's going to get a bulk of the carries, it's going to help him. Antonio Gibson in that game still had 14 carries and as well as 3 targets. We know that he's the preferred passing down back when J.D. McKissick is out. But great matchup. I mean, that's really why we like both of these guys. Most yards, fantasy points to running backs this season. The second most touchdowns with 14 as well. The Texans have allowed 4 running backs to get to 30 fantasy points this season, which is just ridiculous.
Yeah, it's crazy.
4 guys have gotten to that number. I mean, it's unreal. So
30
great matchup.
more rushing yards per game than any other defense allowed.
Yeah.
30.
Atrocious
Like
run
if you look
defense.
at the gap between like 31 and 32, and Kyle probably knows this better than I. It's like the same gap as like 12 to 31. It's absurd. They have just been a sieve on the ground against opposing rushing attacks. For the Texans, just don't even bother. Come on. You're not starting a Texan other than Dameon Pierce. Brandon Cooks has had minimal volume since week 1, really since week 2 or 3, and the upside's not there. Nico Collins found the end zone last week. Great. He found the end zone.
Yeah,
but
he's flirting with flex territory, but remember, Cooks had missed some time during that stretch as well, where he's been getting 10 fantasy points. That was by far his best game. Not usually a touchdown score, not yet anyway.
I could see a couple of Washington drives, by the way, on Sunday that are like Tennessee in the first half last night, where Tennessee just sucked the life out of Green Bay. The first half was 12 minutes long. I mean, not literally, but
it was really quick,
9-12, and it was a 2-minute warning. I was like, how is this possible? And because they had a 10.5-minute drive that ended with 0 points somehow.
And this is what Washington did to Philly last week, too. They just ran the ball a ton, and they're going to try to do that again.
Traveling on a short week, that's what you're going to want to do, by the way.
And everyone tries to run against Houston as well. So that's exactly what's going to happen here. They're going to run as much as they can, and Houston's going to do the same thing.
Raiders, Broncos, the Disappointment Bowl takes place in Denver on Sunday, the second time these two teams have played. Lineup blocks, Josh Jacobs for the Raiders, Devontae Adams for the Raiders as well. Worth noting that Devontae Adams could, maybe Mike, see a Patrick Surtain II shadow, yes or no?
Yes, I do think he will in this one, but it's also Devontae Adams.
Yeah.
So
just a heads up.
No, I know.
Daily fantasy avoid, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you can, but I mean, he went over 100 yards when they played the first time.
Okay.
So, I mean, he was fine.
Maybe not.
Surtain is awesome, and if there's a week where Adams could get shut down, maybe it's this one, but it's still Devontae Adams. So you're starting him, and you feel pretty good about it.
All right, Stephania, Jerry Jeudy, he has not yet practiced for Denver. Is that correct?
He has not yet practiced.
That tells you what you think, probably, right?
I mean, we'll see. They made it sound like it was minor, but when he went down, it certainly didn't look that way. And sometimes you don't know until you get out and test it. So pay attention to what happens on Friday, but certainly not encouraging so far.
And obviously, Darren Waller still out. Mike, you think Foster Moreau showed you enough last week that he's like a mid-tier tight end too, or what?
No, he had 43 yards in that game, scored a touchdown. It was his first game with double-digit fantasy points this season. So he had a lot of duds, the games Waller had missed earlier this season. Finally had a decent one. The only reason you're considering him is because of what we talked about earlier, which is tight end is a dumpster fire after the first few.
But 23 targets over the past 4 games is not nothing amongst tight ends.
No, but I mean, what conversation is he in? He's in Tyler Conklin. And
yes, well, for those of us that play in the War Room League, we're I'm
starting
Gronk.
I mean, a 16-team league, he looks great.
Yeah, I'm starting Gronk otherwise, so it's tough.
We have him. We both have him 16th. I mean, that's what he is. He's like a good tight end 2 right now.
As far as I'm assuming if there was a tight end in this game that you were starting, it would be Greg Dulcich. Or
I would lean Dulcich. He's coming off a dud, but before that was pretty good. Yeah. Still out there in about half of ESPN leagues, and you would. Presumably, he'll just get better, right? He was a top 12 scorer the first 3 games, had the dud. The targets haven't been there the past couple of weeks, but, it looks like a good player. Rookie tight ends just continue to get better, and it's a good matchup against the Raiders, right? 5th most fantasy points to tight end, so I do like Dulcich.
So Broncos, listen, if you want to ride the Russell Wilson train, go ahead, have fun. It's probably not going to work out that great for you because he's been terrible this season. That's your prerogative, though. The backfield, Mike, is this
hold on Russ, though?
He's had one good game against the Raiders. So you're buying in?
This week, yeah. I would stream him this week.
Okay.
I mean, the Raiders, again, same stat. Just keep updating it. They've allowed 17-plus fantasy points to every single quarterback they have faced. And, of course, one of them was Russ, who had, I think, 24? 27.
So if you're a Tua or a Brady manager and you're looking for somebody to step in this weekend, it could be Russell Wilson. Can you
if we're going to use him
in 2022 and we're like, maybe not Russ. Imagine that conversation 2 years ago.
I have Russ, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford. I don't know who to pick. They're all terrible.
Is the Broncos backfield anything different than the Rams backfield, Mike?
No, because we saw Chase Edmonds have some involvement in his first game with the team, and that could increase. We still saw Melvin Gordon kind of have the lead there, 39 snaps, 26 pass routes. So he still kind of kept control over Chase Edmonds in that department. That's enough for me to rank him as the preferred flex option, but you're not going to feel great about any of this, especially if they're trailing. What if they're trailing and they're like, all right, let's take a look at Chase Edmonds and put him out there in obvious passing situations? That's a real risk here. So I don't love it, but again, if you have to pick one, it's Gordon.
Yeah, and my preference would be to start none of them. That would be my preferred option here. And then Cortland Sutton, Mike, who you mentioned how Russell Wilson had a big game the last time. Do we expect that Cortland Sutton can go off because he's been sort of heating up of late? And if it's a good matchup for the quarterback, you would think it's a good matchup for his clear-cut number 1 wide receiver.
Yeah, definitely. And I have him 13th, and the reason for that is partially because Jerry Jeudy is dicey for this one, and I'll be surprised if he plays.
Hamler's out.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So, I mean, if Jeudy does come back and practices and plays, I'll downgrade.
Isn't Kendall Hinton also questionable?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So that's the reason I'm so high on Sutton is, though, he's going to have to see all these targets, and that's what we saw last week. He had 11 targets in that game. Also, again, rematch with the Raiders. The last time they played, he had 16.2 fantasy points, one of 7 receivers that have hit 15 points against him this season. So, again, they struggling against the pass. Sutton should see a ton of targets. I think he's back in the lineup lock conversation, at least for 1 week, at least for one more week.
Somebody's going to lose this game. Well, I guess it's a tie, but the loser of this game will either be 2-8 or 3-7.
Wow.
That's remarkable. Remember before the season, it was like all these teams biting at the ankles of the Chiefs?
So much for parity.
Nah. Chiefs still in a tier of their own in the AFC West. We're going to discuss the Cowboys and the Vikings in a second.
How many teams in the NFC East and AFC East are below 500?
I know the answer to that one.
You do?
Yeah.
You know?
I don't.
0.
They're all 500 or better. Who would have thought?
Yeah.
And the West has 2 teams that could be picking top 5.
And by the way, I expect that
Yeah,
to hold after this because there's no team in the AFCs that could be below 500 after this week. And I think the Commanders win. So it could just be that all teams actually could be above 500 by the end of the week, right?
The AFC playoff race right now, all 4 AFC East teams are in right now.
All 3 of the wild card spots are the Bills,
Unbelievable.
Jets. I think the Jets actually have the tiebreaker over the Bills, right? So Jets, Bills, Patriots is the 3. Ridiculous.
It's exactly how we thought it would play out.
Of course.
This is
right?
This is the hardest season to predict ever. I
Ever.
mean,
Yeah.
it didn't seem
Ever.
like it really
On
before the
every
season,
level.
but
Wins
it's just
and fantasy production and
what a year.
Yeah.
Anyway, Hot Ticket is brought to you by Vivid Seats, where you earn rewards with every purchase. Vivid Seats Rewards is your ticket to more tickets. Vivid Seats. Life happens live. This week's Hot Ticket is the Cowboys heading into Minnesota to face the hottest team in the NFL. Speaking of hot teams, man, the Vikings.
They are ridiculous right now. They
Ridiculous.
have a 7-game winning streak, of course, the longest in the NFL. A lot of lineup blocks in this game. This is the most fantasy-friendly game of the weekend. CeeDee Lamb, Dalton Schultz, Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson. I want to ask Stephania about Justin Jefferson here in just a second. Injuries-wise, Stephania, Zeke Elliott, it sounds like he's going to go.
Yeah, and last week we heard a lot of encouraging talk from Mike McCarthy about, Zeke, he's close. But you heard from the player that he did not feel great. And when you're hearing from the player that he feels like he needs more practice reps before he gets in a game, I think that tells you everything you need to know. Zeke's always been pretty straightforward about how he feels. And this week he says he's definitely very optimistic about this week, barring any setbacks. I think I'm in a good spot. He's going to be wearing a brace. Remember, he had that knee hyperextension with a bone bruise, stressing the same knee that he had a problem with before. He said this was a little bit different type of an injury from last time where he thought he could push through it, but he was less productive. This one, he really needed to rest it to get to where he thought he could play, but now he feels much better about it. So Mike McCarthy did say he had a really good practice on Wednesday, and so everything has been positive around Zeke, and I think he will be better stepping back in after this than he was last year coming back from what he came back from.
When I first heard that Justin Jefferson had been put on the Vikings injury report, I assumed back.
Yeah.
From carrying
right,
like the world of football on his back, right? But it's not a back injury.
No,
it's
a toe injury, which can be really problematic for a receiver. He's had limited practice, but I will say he said his toe feels great and he's ready to play. So whatever it was, it appears to have been relatively minor.
I did move him all the way down to wide receiver 1 for the week because of this toe injury. So pretty dramatic impact there for Justin Jefferson.
Wow, you're a hater.
I will say they do play on Thanksgiving. So I think if there was any question about him, I wouldn't be surprised if he comes in as questionable unless he just has a full practice today. And he's very confident, but it always makes you worry when they have such a short week that follows.
Catches your attention at the very least. Cowboys backs, Mike. Bad news. I mean, it's great for Zeke that he's getting healthier, and obviously he's a guy that's meant a lot to the Cowboys on and off the, on the field for sure, on and off the field for sure. But this is a situation for fantasy where it gets a lot dicier, and it becomes basically 2 guys biting, taking away the value from each other. And I would prefer to have clarity, but right now I think this puts you get 2 flexes. You get 2 biceps, you flex them both. That's what happens with the Cowboys running backs.
Yeah, it is. And it's hard to pick one. I think they're basically even in fantasy value because you look at Tony Pollard, he's been between 8 and 14 touches in every game that Zeke has played so far this season, but he's the preferred passing down back, and Zeke is a non-factor as a pass catcher, though he is averaging 16.5 touches per game and has 3 touchdowns in his last 2 outings, right? So his rushing volume has been good. He's been finding the end zone. The offense has been better. So it's a close call. It's basically a toss-up. They're both flex options. If I had to pick one, I'm going to give a slight edge to Zeke. But again, it is very close, closer than we thought it would be.
So the Vikings on paper look like a good matchup for quarterbacks, but could there be something misleading in the quarterback numbers there, specific to the fact that they've kind of been carved by good running quarterbacks?
Yeah, I'm not too worried about that, right? Because if you face a lot of running quarterbacks, they'll pull it down and run. If you don't, then they'll do that damage through the air, right? So at the end of the day, they've allowed the 3rd most yards to opposing quarterbacks and the 10th most fantasy points. So yeah, some of that's been on the ground, but Dak sometimes adds value with his legs too. We saw that a couple weeks ago, right? He had a really good fantasy game. I think it was QB3 that week, and a lot of that damage was done with his legs. So I'm not too worried about that. Season-high touchdown passes last week, 19 plus fantasy points in 2 straight for Dak Prescott. More passing last week. That's what we've been asking for. We want them to open up the offense a little bit. So we're getting there. We're getting there with Dak, and hopefully he can kind of cement himself as a weekly QB1.
Did I see somewhere that you think Michael Gallup could be in for a sneaky nice day?
I think so. Cam Dantzler out, and Minnesota's allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to receivers. So Gallup's been a disappointment. We thought once he came back, let me rephrase that. I don't want to say disappointment for a guy off an ACL, right? It's just taken some time for him to get back to consistent fantasy relevance. The production hasn't been there. Scored the touchdown in his first game back, but since then it's been pretty quiet. 5 targets and 6.5 fantasy points per game. Not what we want out of Michael Gallup, but with a good matchup, he's trending up a little bit here.
I would just remind people he came back early, and I remember saying when he was coming back, "Wow, this is early." And you remember he sounded a little apprehensive at first. Remember, he delayed it. He delayed it. He pushed for more practice. Comes back, has a great game, and everybody's like, "Whoa!" Had a little stiffness and soreness and things that you just are not surprised when you hear it after ACL, and he might get better as the season goes on, but this is kind of what I expected.
You certainly hope he can sort of hit that stride late in the season, because while he's not as young as all those players that I was mentioning, like we've seen Michael Gallup be a really, really good player in the past, and he could be one of those late season lottery tickets as well. Do you have a live read over there, Mike, or no?
I do not.
Okay, well, let's keep
I have
moving.
the day off. I'm just going to sit here and relax.
Okay,
All right.
Sweet. All right, so we'll keep things moving then. Bengals-Steelers game is being played in Pittsburgh, a rematch from their Week 1 matchup. As far as locks go in this game, I've got 5 count. Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and Pat Freiermuth, the only Steeler. There's a very, very critical injury in this one, Stephania. It is, of course, Jamar Chase. Where are we at with his recovery?
Still dealing with the hip injury and not practicing. Jeremy Fowler reported yesterday that people he's talked to said they have an eye on Week 12. I think that tells you can already assume he's not playing this week.
Okay, no expectation for him to play this week. Tyler Boyd obviously steps into a much, much, much bigger role. Can this Pittsburgh offense get things going at all, Mike? Like, at all? Have I shared this stat with you? The longest touchdown they've scored this year?
Yeah, what was it, 8 yards or
Yeah,
something?
they have not scored. Yes. Ridiculous.
Uh-huh.
So weird.
You have a rookie quarterback. He's only made a few starts, maybe. He starts to progress, and they start to be more productive in the passing game, but they're also in a bit of a rebuild mode, and they traded Chase Claypool, which kind of cemented that, right? So it's going to be a work in progress. Also, one of your top offensive playmakers is a rookie, and George Pickens. They're trying to get him more involved, and you have major questions at running back because Najee Harris just has not been as productive this season, not to mention the oft-discussed offensive line issues. So, what we're hoping for from a fantasy perspective is funnel targets to 3 guys, Freiermuth, Pickens, and Johnson, which we expect, and hopefully one of Harris, ideally, kind of takes more control of the backfield, right? It's been kind of a split right now. We want him to take most of the carries, and then we can feel good about at least some of these guys.
Yeah, and surprising that Najee hasn't had as much passing game utilization. He had 0 catches last week. He had 99 rushing yards. That part's pretty solid, but you'd like to see him get like 2 to 4 catches per game, right? It's still Najee Harris. He led the NFL in terms of running back receptions last season. To say that the Pittsburgh Steelers offense is a tough watch is to put it kindly. Let's talk about a fun offense to watch. 2 of them, actually. The Chiefs and the Chargers, and there are some significant injuries in this one. But as far as the lineup blocks go, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler. I want to ask Mike about Justin Herbert here in a second. But injuries, Stephania, a whole bunch of them on the Chiefs side. Let's begin with wide receivers.
When you have so many, you're like, okay, gotta look. So, reminder that Mecole Hardman was placed on injured reserve this week.
Interesting one.
Yeah, well, he had that abdominal injury, and then he had an illness, but sometimes these abdominal injuries turn out to be more significant than you thought. They may have thought, who knows? Don't know how they're managing it, but they decided he would be out for multiple weeks.
Okay.
Marquez Valdez-Scantling's been on the injured report, also with an illness. There's a couple of clubs, by the way, that have illness running rampant through it. This is that time of year, flu season. We see this happen. So, but he did come back to practice on Thursday. So Valdez-Scantling back in practicing. Let's see who else. Juju Smith-Schuster with a concussion. He left the game with the Jags against the Jags last week in the second quarter, and He was talking and chatting with players after the game, so that was all very encouraging, but still not practicing this week. So I don't think it looks, terrific for
Okay.
Juju.
Well, we're going to do a Chiefs wide receivers conversation here in a second. Chargers wide receivers to find.
Yes.
More
and-
injuries there.
Yeah. Keenan Allen, do you guys know how much he's played this year?
I'm guessing like 2 games.
Yeah, one game and a half a game. That was it, because he had the one game, he tried to come back and he played half a game and really didn't feel great. And he had said that he felt good going into the game, but he knew he couldn't be fully explosive. And this time he wasn't going to come back till he was 100%. But when they went into the bye week, if you recall, he had an injury training during the bye week. So setback for that hamstring, as so often happens. He is back practicing, and this is the first time that he's had 2 consecutive days since all of this came up. So we're feeling like there's a chance that Keenan Allen does come back this week. Remains to be seen. It's not definitive. And then Mike Williams, of course, out because of the high ankle sprain, but limited in practice. So actually doing some things in practice.
So maybe they could play on Sunday night. Maybe. We'll see. We shall
I'd
see.
be surprised with Mike Williams. Just the way the injury looked. That one would surprise me. Did you actually? Lindsay Theory put out a tweet yesterday that I thought was really kind of shocking, to tell you how little they've all played together, how little they've had their offensive pass catchers, stars on the field together. Only 43 plays this season with Keenan Allen, Mike Williams on the field together. 7% of their total offensive plays.
And you wonder why Herbert's been a little underproductive in fantasy,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
amazing.
It's tough.
So we had him in lineup blocks. How confident of a lineup block does that feel for you for Justin Herbert?
It's still Justin Herbert. He's still one of the best in the business. We know that at times he can add value with his legs. And the big one here is the Chiefs have given up a ton of production through the air because they're the Chiefs and they're always ahead in games. And we know Herbert's going to have to throw it a lot. He also had I don't have it in front of me, but he had a big game against them the first time. I think it was 3 touchdowns and 340 yards.
He shattered his ribs during that game.
Yeah,
too.
right. That's right. Yeah. So, we've seen this before where he has to throw against the Chiefs and is productive in fantasy. So if I have him, I feel decent starting him. And that will be the case regardless of who's at wide receiver.
So, Mike, I think with fantasy, it's good to sort of manage expectations and know what you are after. And I think when it comes to the Chiefs backfield, I don't think if I were starting any Chiefs back that I would be chasing 20 fantasy points.
No, I would feel great. It's game script dependent too. It's going to just depend on what's happening in the game. If the Chargers jump ahead in this one and they're trailing, we're going to see a lot of Jerick McKinnon. We'll see more Clyde Edwards-Helaire than the 4 snaps he played last week. And Andy Reid's already saying they need to use CEH more. That doesn't matter. What does that mean? 15 snaps? 20? Like, it's not going to be the point where you feel great starting him. Exactly. So, and of course, if they're leading in this game and they jump up 14-0, we're going to see a ton of Isaiah Pacheco, right? He's going to be on the field a lot, carrying the ball, getting 15 carries and no targets. Right. It's just frustrating all around. They're utilizing a ton of backs here. Pacheco might start, but again, the lack of passing game involvement makes him basically Gus Edwards and a little bit of a better offense. Yeah. It's not a great situation. If you can avoid all of these guys, you should. We have Pacheco slightly ahead of McKinnon in our rankings. And obviously,
flipped. Yeah.
You have a flip. But
McKinnon,
again, it's a
McKissick.
toss-up. It's a toss-up. And the Chargers are a good team, so maybe it is a week where it's close or they're behind and McKinnon plays more. But he hasn't been good in fantasy either. He's like one good game. So avoid this situation if you can.
Yeah, I think McKinnon is J.D. McKissick. You need 5 or 6 catches from him, and you're hoping for like 12 fantasy points. For Pacheco, you're going to need either 125 rushing yards or a touchdown to break double-digit fantasy points, most likely.
And who knows who will be on the field when they're near the goal line, because you might think, all right, they're at the 2, they'll just run it in with Pacheco, but they might throw it to CEH.
They might throw it to Nick Allegretti.
It's
an offensive lineman because they're the Chiefs. Shout out to Nick Allegretti, by the way. Dude's got soft hands.
The rare fantasy shout out for him, right?
Yeah, duh. All right, so if those 2 Chargers receivers do not play, we kind of know how things shake out. It's going to be Josh Palmer, some DeAndre Carter. He's been on the injury report. Worth keeping an eye on that one as well. But if it's 2 Chargers wide receivers, you just play the 2. Of those top 3, if 2 out of the 3 are available, you play the top 2. If it's Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, you play them. Although our Allen expectations have been lower just because we did see him start a game and not finish a game earlier on this season, as Stephania alluded to. Let's talk about the Chiefs wide receivers, though. This one's fun here, Mike. All right, imagine a world where Juju Smith-Schuster does not play. And it seems like we are headed that direction with back-to-back DMPs and the concussion. That would leave Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Kadarius Toney, Justin Watson, and Sky Moore as the top 4 available wide receivers. Here's the player that matters there. it's Kadarius Toney, right? Because MVS has been playing a ton this season, recently found the end zone for the first time. I'm not saying he has no value, but it's not like I would throw MVS as like a top 15 play if there's no Juju.
No, I agree with you. And earlier this week, I was texting with Field Yates, and he asked me what the routes looked like when Juju Smith-Schuster went out. And they were Justin Watson 17, which will probably surprise some people, MVS 16, Kadarius Toney 9, Sky Moore 9, right? Yeah. So they use 4 guys pretty significantly, to your point. If you're ordering them for fantasy, I agree with you. It's Kadarius Toney. He's the best talent, and his role continues to evolve. Had the 4 catches and 57 yards and a touchdown and 15 routes against Jacksonville. Also had 2 carries for 33 yards. He's been good so far, and if he's on the field and even plays 50 to 70% of the snaps, that's going to be good enough to get him on the fantasy radar. So he's 1 for me. MVS, I would put 2. Justin Watson, I would put 3. Sky Moore shouldn't be near lineups.
I can't wait to watch that one. Cannot wait to watch that one on Sunday night between these 2 teams. And Kadarius Toney, he is absolutely electric. That much is for sure. Let's wrap things up with 49ers and Cardinals. That game is being played in Mexico City, of course, Monday Night Football. A lot of lineup blocks in this game, assuming they play. Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Kyler Murray, big question mark there. James Conner, DeAndre Hopkins. Worth noting, though, that Conner, it's a really tough matchup for him, but still you got to play him. Let's get to the injuries, Stephania. I'll start with Kyler. Big one there.
Yeah, and it sounds like they could wait another week for him with the hamstring injuries. Not a lock to play, so we don't know yet. Stay tuned, but they could opt to wait another week. It's very, just something to throw in there. I know we talk about the altitude. We talked the other day about how elevated the stadium is. Mexico City is over 7,000 feet. Dehydration is a real risk factor for aggravating soft tissue injuries. What's one of the biggest risks with altitude? Dehydration. And you just wonder,
Cold
is
muscles,
that going? And they didn't go back. They didn't go anywhere to pre-train, if you will, for altitude. The 49ers are in Colorado Springs right now doing exactly that. So it's just curious.
Yeah, interesting.
We'll see.
And by the way, Colt McCoy's been banged up too, but it sounds like Shefty said yesterday he's got a pretty good chance to play if needed. It seemed like based off of his reporting. There's been no quarterback movement for the Cardinals, no like practice squad addition or anything. So at this point of the week, you'd be surprised if anybody was added. Hollywood Brown, Stephania, he returned to practice.
He did.
I
been
believe
designated for return off injured reserve.
But because he is not on the 53-man roster, not obligated to be on the injury report.
Right. So 21 days they have from designating him for return. Cliff Kingsbury did say he wanted to see what he looked like in full padded practice on Thursday. That's kind of their big practice of the week. He did come back for that. And to his point, he said he thought it was going to be a 4-week injury, even though originally it was outlined for potentially 6 weeks, but also acknowledged you have to be cautious with this kind of thing. Coming back, seeing how his foot feels on the field, what the playing conditions are like. Again, is this really the game you want to bring him back when you're going to a stadium that you don't have a ton of experience with? You're playing at altitude. First game, he's only had a couple days of practice. I just feel like it would be soon for him, but we shall see.
It feels like it will be soon as well. If he does play Mike, is this lineup lock status right away?
I'd have a hard time benching him. He's kind of in that Keenan Allen conversation, right, where you're worried about him being limited, but he's just so good. He's just so good. So,
but how about if he does play? What does it mean for Rondale Moore's value? Does that mean all of a sudden the bottom drops out, and we're talking about a guy that's a flex consideration only?
It certainly takes a hit in the volume he has seen as of late, but he's kind of a high floor play because they're going to manufacture touches for him, right? Yeah. So, but I am a little worried, and keep this in mind. Zach Ertz was hanging around a, say, 17 to 20% target share. He's gone. And they might, like when we first saw Cliff Kingsbury coaching and running this offense, the tight ends were zeros. They just weren't thrown to them at all. Right?
Play 4 receivers all the time.
Exactly. So we could be back to that. If they don't trust Trey McBride for more than a couple targets, it could just be those 3 guys seeing all of the targets. They're not throwing to the running backs a ton right now either. So I think it's possible that all 3 guys will be fantasy relevant. If I was ordering them, it'd be Hopkins, and then you got to read the tea leaves on Brown. Is he going to play and be limited, or is he full go? Those kind of things we're going to have to feel out, and then that will kind of determine where we rank him versus Rondale Moore. But for now, I would consider more a flex option for this week.
So last week, I asked you, what would it take for Brandon Ayuk to enter lineup block status? And you said, well, hey, this is the first game with the Big 4, Big 5 all available. Did you see enough from Brandon Ayuk that he belongs in lineup blocks?
Well, the stat last week was he's been between 81 and 83 yards in 3 straight games. Well, he's been between 81 and 84 yards in 4 straight games. So it's just very consistent production. 3 touchdowns during those 4 games, 6+ touches in all of them. I have him 24th. You're a little higher than me, Field. I do have some mild concerns that he's going to be a little boom bust moving forward, but he hasn't been for the last month. So for now, you got to fire him up. He's such a good player and obviously been a big part of this offense.
You notice how like Stephania's just lighting up over here. She's like, my team rules.
Talk about me. Yeah,
We're about to hit our stride.
Look, I'm not gonna speak up because like, the 49ers having all, like you said, big four, big five, like all of them on the field together one time. So, until we consistently have a healthy team, I'm not gonna say a word.
And of course, Elijah Mitchell did play a ton last week, Mike, but I think what we learned is that he's got to fall into the end zone to be worthwhile, which might mean that somebody else like Christian McCaffrey is not falling into the end zone.
Yeah, big game script energy in this one in his stat line. The first 16 carries they had, 11 went to Christian McCaffrey when they were trailing, and it was a competitive game. Then they got the lead, and what happened? They flipped it. Elijah Mitchell had 13 of the final 16 carries. So it may depend on game script going forward. I don't think Mitchell's going to have standalone value just because it's Christian McCaffrey, and he's going to play 70-80% of the snaps. Right? It's just going to be hard for Mitchell to be a top 30 scorer unless he scores.
Do you think the 49ers are disappointed that their away game against the Cardinals this year isn't in Arizona so that they can't do scouting of Super Bowl hotels, Stephania?
No, if they're smart, they're not doing any of that.
Have you done any of that?
Yeah, we are not getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, because they won't need to. The Eagles will be there.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
they don't. Why bother?
Oh my God. If you guys play in the NFC Championship game,
Oh, that's going to be fun.
oh my gosh.
yeah. And if it happens in Philly, we're going.
Oh, we're going.
Oh, you gotta go.
Oh yeah, of course.
Totally.
I mean, if it happens in the Bay Area,
Can I stay in your skybox, or do I have to sit in the seats?
we'll see
in
how you
Philly?
behave.
You're allowed in the
between
box,
now and
don't
then.
worry. Anything else? Any closing thoughts here from you guys before we say goodbye and get ready for Sunday morning? Anything you want to empty the bucket on?
I don't think so. I think we're pretty good. It's gonna be a shorter week next year. I can't believe we're already talking
Next week.
Thanksgiving. soon.
Yeah,
Not
good call.
next
Yeah,
week, but
that's
next
a good
week.
call
Next
from
week.
Mike. Just a little heads up. We're going to do a show Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week, which means that Wednesday will be like a Friday, which means that we're going to be giving you as much information as we have. It just won't be anywhere close to our full amount of information. We're sorry for that, but we hope you understand. And frankly, hopefully you'll be out eating turkey on Thursday and too tired on Friday to even listen to a podcast. Fantasy Football Now, Sunday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, ESPN2 the entire way. She's Stephania. He's Mike. I'm Field. We'll talk to you guys on Sunday night. Until then, good luck. Get those lineups set.
So if it's in San Francisco, I can't come. That's what you're saying?
But that
You
would
have
mean
your
that the
first class
Eagles
tickets?
really,
No, you
really struggle down the
can.
stretch.
I just don't
Oh,
know
yeah,
how
that's
well you fans travel to the West.
Wow.
But Eagles travel well. I mean, they do.
Are you an Eagle?
I'm an Eagle.